hacia una vida más valiosa y significativa. Values, Instituto Peruano de Psicología y Ciencia Contextual.
Hi, Mavis. Hi, Bob. I'm very glad.
Hello,
I'm very glad to be here with you in this interview, no? Because I would like to share the ACL model to the Latin America community, Peruvian community of psychologists.
Happy to be here with you.
Mm.
Yes.
So maybe my first question is, why did you choose to study psychology, and how was your career path after graduating as psychologist?
Can I take an hour to answer this question?
Yeah. No, it's like
You have 1 minute.
So I have an unusual path to get to psychology and studying psychology, and that is I graduated in engineering. I went into a business setting in which I was running a small company, mainly selling electrical supplies and kind of engineering related things and so forth. And one of the things that I needed is I was trying to hire people to work in this company. This is going to take too long, I think, right? Are you worried?
Shorten it. Yeah, I'd like questions.
And so I ran into, I didn't know how to select people who would be in this company, who would work with me. And so I ran into a system which was actually constructed by a psychologist somewhere, in which he had like 6 little tests that you give people. And you give them these tests, and then you score them, and then it comes up with an answer. The answers were qualified, overqualified, underqualified, or unqualified. And I thought, here I'm trained in engineering, and I thought, oh, this is wonderful. We can take humans, give them some tests, decide whether they're qualified or unqualified. That sounds just great. And so I said, okay, that sounds great. And then I was talking to some colleagues about it, and they said, well, have you heard of the MMPI? That's actually a good thing to give people, a test. I said, no, I haven't heard of the MMPI, but why not just order some MMPIs and we'll just give them to people. So I looked up on the web how to get an MMPI, and they said, well, are you a psychologist? I said, no, I'm an engineer. They said, well, you can't order MMPIs if you're not a psychologist. You have to be a psychologist. I said, well, how do I do that? They said, well, this is to give you an idea. So I'm very unfamiliar with psychology in the beginning. They said, well, you've got to take courses, you've got to go to graduate school, blah, 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 blah. So that actually is what started me on the career. I said, well, I want to order an MMPI. Now, in this day and age, of course, I don't use MMPIs. But back then, I thought, well, this is the key. So, Mavis, am I getting too far afield here?
You do need to shorten the answer.
All right. You have to remember, Renzo, this is what Mavis is worried about with me. And so I actually went and I decided, it took me a while, decided in order to order MMPIs, I have to go to graduate school in psychology. So that's actually the beginning of my career. And that's what started it. And of course, the end result is I do not use MMPIs now, of course, and I'm completely different. But that really is the change to my career. And so there's more to the questions. What was the career path after graduating?
Let me answer my part of it. It's a lot simpler. I don't think that my path reflects that of most people. I'm curious about your path, but I know we're here to talk about us. But I knew very early on that this was my calling. I knew it in middle school. And so I just pursued. I remember taking psychology classes as a high school student at our local college, and then just getting very focused on getting a bachelor's degree in psychology, which I did at UCLA in Los Angeles, and then I applied to graduate school. So it's been a very straight, short path for me because I just knew this was my passion.
So I just want to say, I knew I had to get into graduate school in order that I can eventually order MPIs. And so I'm willing to undertake this course, 5 years of study to do this. And so that's what I did. And the reason they took me in graduate school is because at that time, they wanted people with engineering background, because especially with the neuropsychological stuff that's going on, they needed somebody who was very well schooled in that kind of thing. So that's the route that I took. And I actually got into graduate school. They were happy to take an engineer who knew nothing about psychology into graduate school.
And the second part of the question is our career path after becoming a psychologist. So in graduate school, when you're in a doctoral program in the US, they really focus on training us to become researchers and academicians. And that's what I was trained to do in graduate school. So I went to graduate school here at the University of Washington. And it was actually very difficult for me to make the decision not to go into academia because I was so well trained to do it. But I didn't want to sell my soul to publish or perish, because that was what most academicians faced. And so I started in private practice, and I also taught graduate students at the UW, and I've managed to create this career where I get to do all the things that I love, which is clinical work, research, teaching, but not be dominated by the policies of the university. And you went the traditional route, but you didn't care for the longest time about promotion. You just kind of did what you wanted. And it wasn't until last 10 years of your career that you decided, oh, maybe I should get promoted to full professor. Like you got your tenure, and then you just did the research that you wanted to do. And
right. So. And a very important part of my career in terms of development of that is that during my graduate school years, I saw Mavis actually do amazing things with clients. And so I didn't quite understand, how is this possible? How was she able to do such remarkable things and get changes in clients? And so that became an interest of mine, to understand how Mavis had such incredible impact on clients. That's a shortened story. Does that make sense?
That's how FAP was created.
And that's how FAP was created. And
so your next question, you wanted to know.
Yeah,
what FAP means in our life today, and how did our clinical practice change by implementing FAP?
Yeah.
So I think it went both ways. It's like you were describing what I was doing, and we created FAP that way. You came up with the rules by watching what I was doing, but because we both followed the rules, it really increased the impact and the power of our therapy. And so it was this creating it, but then it enriched what we did so much. And it's this feedback loop where our clients just gave us more feedback about, wow, this is really powerful, what you're doing.
That's a very important part of the whole process, and that is I went from very traditional behavior therapy type procedures and then saw remarkable changes that Mavis produced in clients, remarkable changes. And I thought, well, how is she doing that? How does that come from? And actually trying to solve that mystery of how it is that Mavis was able to get incredible clinical improvements in clients. What was involved with that? I mean, I would call that a very important element in the development of FAP and how we got to where we are. So now, how did you do? Why were you so good with the clients? Never mind. So, but I think, we tried to capture what it was that you did. But the reality is you had a lifetime of training growing up. And
Well, remember I was a graduate student when you were doing this.
yes.
Yeah, when I was near the end of my graduate career and then the beginning of my postdoctoral career when we were really trying to outline how can we teach this to other people.
Right.
So what are you thinking as you're listening to us?
Is this confusing to you? Or?
No, I was, well, there was things that I didn't read on the books. So parts from the book and parts from I didn't know. So I'm impressed to know this new information. So it's very good.
So, and then the question is, how did Mavis become such an incredibly good clinician without the formal training? Because she was just that way naturally. And that's actually trying to capture what it is that made her so powerful. And that's kind of the origins of FAP. Do you agree? That's what it was about. And it was, right. It was throwing out the usual ways to develop treatments and do treatment and so forth.
Yeah, it's important to me and sharing the beginning of FAP to the people starting to know how FAP was created. No? So,
right. So in a nutshell, one of the things that I picked up is that when Mavis was interacting with clients clinically, incredible things would happen, remarkable things in terms of client change, insights, and so forth. And that was very powerful for me. And I wanted to systematize this so others like me could do this with clients when they see that. And that again, that is kind of the essence of FAP. What do you think, Mavis? Am I praising you too much about you?
We can move on, thank you.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, it's very good to know the beginning, no? So
Yeah, but so in layman's terms, so the rules, you know the rules, like rule 1 being aware of clinically relevant behaviors, rule 2 evoking clinically relevant behaviors, rule 3 reinforcing them, rule 4 being aware of our impact, and rule 5 generalizing. And I think I naturally just knew that I wanted to be as authentic as I could with the person in front of me and to see the best of who they are. And that got translated into this work.
Right.
yeah. So the experience first the experience, next the rules. Yeah. Maybe we can go to the next question. It's about the research. Can you tell us how the Center of Social Connection at the University of Washington was created?
So a lot, there's all of this pre-stuff that occurred that allowed this to happen. In the process of me trying to systematize what it is that Mavis does that's so powerful, Mavis and I developed a theory and ways to kind of capture this. Very different, by the way, there's fundamental things that are very different, as you know, about FAP from every other type of therapy. And so, so in the process of doing that, that's the development of the therapy, and I'm just repeating myself. So,
Okay,
right?
and then how did you get funding for the Center for Science of Social Connection?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have a person who was very taken with this therapy said this is the most remarkable thing that he ever heard of in terms of how the therapy worked. Because with FAP, you actually throw out almost a lot of the usual rules at the time that people were following when they do therapy. And the person said, I want to provide funds for you because this is an incredible treatment. I'd like to provide funds for you so that you can do the research, the outcome research, and help promote it and pass this on to the world. And in that process, we hired Jonathan Cantor, and he actually came up with the idea for the Center for Science of Social Connection, and that's how it happened. So this is all. I'm being very brief about this. It sounds like it was a smooth process. There was all little steps along the way. There's resistance at the time because FAP is not a typical therapy. And so there was always resistance to these ideas. And a typical comment made by my colleagues when we would present FAP is to say, oh, you're doing psychoanalysis. So I thought, what? No, this is a different kind of thing. But in many ways has a lot in common with what psychoanalysts do. We're very sympathetic, I am personally, to what Freud did, how he came up with psychodynamic principles, and so forth, which actually map on well. They're consistent with FAP. This may be surprising to people, but they're consistent even though the theory is not psychodynamic, not psychoanalytic. Is that too brief? I'm just wondering if this makes any sense.
No, it's not too brief. So okay. Did we answer your question about the Center for Science of Social Connection?
Yeah, it's very clear and important because I know also a question we didn't know the answer. No? So about that, other kind of question about the therapies, I like to ask you about what does FAP require to be considered an evidence-based therapy?